I'm going to share with you what I did last night with the town council. Sally and Al heard it already, so I apologize for your redundancy.
I'll watch it again.
But I think it's important.
I watched it too, so
Oh,
yeah, I was there.
well, you get more out of it the second time, right?
Absolutely, yeah, no.
The nuance.
So I think
No,
it's
I-
really important for our committee, because we are the Economic Development Committee, to kind of ponder this and look at it. And I want to say at the outset that this is a positive thing, not a negative. I think maybe last night I was a little under the weather, so I might have seemed a bit more negative than normal, but this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. So we've talked about Celebrate Durham, and I added Saxby's and Hop and Grind, because those are the two biggest, I think, additions this year.
Two biggest what?
Additions of companies. We're pretty full downtown. There's a couple of turnovers, but those will be filled up pretty quickly. So I talk about that as we get into this. So why was this committee established? And if you go back to the history 10 years ago, it was established by the town council for the main purpose to foster the stabilization of the residential tax burden. And I have to say that if you look over the last 10 years, there's been a huge change from then to now. The taxes have stabilized, and a lot of that is due to the thoughtful development downtown. The addition of the student housing, I think, was deliberate to help do some of this and to solve some other problems. And so just remind ourselves that is our main purpose. It doesn't mean we ignore all the other important pieces, but that is our piece. And it's through economic development that encourages diverse business, commercial office and research activities, maintain and create jobs, create a good mix of uses, and maintain the rural character of Durham. So then I jump right into the challenge that we have ahead. And according to the Durham budget that's been approved, the 2017 budget that forecasts various CIPs and whatnot through the next 10 years, I looked out 5 years, and actually Jim Lawson helped me do this. So we looked out 5 years to what the change is going to be. So this shows you that we have some significant increases coming through the next 5 years. If you look at the blue line, that is the debt service, and it more than doubles for all the projects that we have going on. Looking at it another way, how much does the tax base need to grow to cover what we project that we're going to be doing? And that essentially, if the blue line is where the assessed values are projected to grow right now, the current status, and the orange line is where we would need to be with our assessment value to cover that growth. So we're looking at about $300 million of additional valuation to get us there. Make sense?
300 million. What's town budget? Gross budget figure.
Isn't it 8 million?
It was 15.
15?
Set up there 14, 15.
14? Okay.
This is assessed value. This is assessed value.
Yeah, this is the assessment.
That's the assessed value.
So,
About 15 with up the general fund.
so I'm going to show you a couple of things. Let me kind of go through this, and I think that'll...
But why is the blue line flat for all those years? I mean,
It's not flat. It's going up. If you look, it goes up a little bit.
I can't see. It looks flat to me.
Very incremental, it's very small.
Effectively, it's flat.
Yeah, it's pretty flat.
Yes, but just don't go ahead, because I want to explain
Don't
things.
look ahead.
All right, let's keep going, and we can come back to this if we have more questions.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is the amount of tax revenue that has to cover that, and it's a 29% increase in property tax revenue over what we have today.
What are the main drivers of that? Of the?
It's what's projected in the budget.
is
So
it the
there are
budget
CIP.
or CIP?
It's
in-
CIP.
CIP.
Adding in. I mean, if you go back, whatever that one where you said the debt service, and you see the debt service going up 50%. So what you can see is, I mean, they've worked really, or they, I guess I'm part of they, the budget to keep it like relatively flat. But the problem is that you have a lot of deferred CIP that's now coming due, and as the CIP comes due, that blue grows. There's no, I mean, unless you're going to cut other parts of the budget, you can't go flat.
Are there new projects in there? In the
you have-
CIP?
Well, you have, like, we just, last night, it's like fire trucks that are coming in, the police station is coming online, you have the new fire station that's gonna need to come online, a variety of different, like, public works projects, so all that is coming due.
So assuming that, and the budget's been reviewed very carefully, you know, our town council is very diligent to look at this, so I'm not going to second guess any of that. That's what's in there. And that if that were to remain the case and valuations remain as they are, this is the 29% increase in tax revenue, which amounts to a 23% increase in the tax rate. Now, I want to explain something here. Let me skip over this because it's a little different when you're talking about property taxes. You come up with your budget, as you know, and then you have your total assessment of taxable property. We have a lot of property that's not taxable. We have the university and we have conservation lands and all kinds of stuff. So you only take the property that is assessed as taxable, and that factors into your tax rate. So right now, we're in a fairly, the recession is over, and property values are rising, home values are rising. That assessment is going to naturally expand. However, the budget is also expanding. So that's a kind of a moving parts piece, and it can be difficult for people to understand, because when you get your tax bill, what do you look at? You look at the dollar amount, right? That's the important piece. So we're really trying to focus on how we can keep people's property taxes, the dollar amount, from going crazy, going 23% or 29%. And so it's really a little different than an income or sales tax. It's a rate. You know, I made $10, I paid $1 in tax. It's just different. So I wanted to mention the middle school. I did not factor that in here. Jim Lawson gave me this as let's put a place marker in there. There's going to be a new school, I think, at some point. Right?
Yeah, I mean, when Jim asked me, and we were in contact with the business manager, Sue Caswell, of the school system, the high school bond that was passed was $22 million, to put this in perspective. So we're kind of, the guess is, what does a new middle school cost? And right now there's a committee that is just looking at, if you did a new middle school, where would it be? So they're charged with looking at, you know, property around the cooperative, Durham, Lee, Madbury, as well as the current location, where would you build it? So I asked the superintendent, he said 35 million is what he was throwing his number. I kept saying 30, so that's where these numbers are coming from.
Right. And I think that considering all of those numbers, it came out to about 74 cents per thousand as an impact potential, but that's just a guesstimate. We really have no clue.
If it makes you feel any better, by the way, the impact for Lee is 0.78, and the impact for Madbury is 0.97.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
not a part of this. This is additional.
It's additional.
It's on top of the
just
other one.
that's just the cost of the middle school. That doesn't include anything else the town does.
Okay.
Right, but this is outside of the 5-year window anyway, since it won't be until 2022 or after.
Right. This is 5 years out.
5 years out.
Within the next 5 years.
But
Maybe
it'll
it's a
start
better way to say it.
increasing within as the 5 years go.
Yeah, it's not going to happen at 5 years. It's going to happen over the 5 years.
Oh, I thought they said that they want to build the middle school after
Well, I don't know about
the
the
high
school.
school bond is retired.
I
Is that what
think
you
you. I think honestly, if you look at those numbers, all right, if you did not do it after the high school bond, then you have to take the first year bond of 2.566 million and add
Right.
another million on top of
Right.
it. So I mean,
Right.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, in the works. I don't know the answer. Okay. So let me see. We did this one. We did this one. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. All right. So what are our options? And maybe you can think of some others, but I came up with these three. We can do nothing and just let it all grow at whatever rate it grows and accept it. Which
And again,
of
we're
course,
back to just the town of Durham, not
Just
the
the town.
school district.
yeah.
right. This is just the town of Durham. Yep. We can live within our current means, which is, a lot of people like to say, let's just live within our means, which is a nice soundbite. But what that actually means is there would be a severe cut to services, and we would continue to defer capital improvements, which means they'll be more expensive when we finally get to them. But that's kind of kicking the can down the road. It's very often the case that sometimes we end up doing that because we just can't make those hard decisions. But that's an option. Or we can grow the tax base if we can thoughtfully plan how to increase the commercial assessment to minimize the impact on residential taxpayers while maintaining what's so very important, the quality of life Durham desires. Now, honestly, I think that realistically there'll be some combination of pieces. There'll be reassessment of what we do want to do. There'll be some additional ways that this can happen. So how can we add essentially $300 million to the tax base, the assessment tax base? Part of that will happen through.
Marianne, I wonder if I could just
Yep.
to put this in perspective.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the increase in the tax base has been in the last, say, 6 years?
Well, I've heard.
Essentially from the student housing.
Yes, I heard
How
it.
much of a proportion in the total, I mean, what, you say 300 million, what's the total tax base? In
So we added somewhere around 105 million, I believe. Does that sound right?
It's like 1.1 billion right now.
So the total.
1.1, so we added 10%.
Yes.
And from a tax point of view, we've just stabilized taxes. Taxes have been the
That's
same.
correct.
In
Yes.
spite of getting a new town hall and new library.
Yes.
and
Yep.
everything. So now we're saying going forward, we need 3 times that amount
Yes.
just to stay even.
Staven, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Challenge.
Yeah. It is. Okay, so.
Perspective, Laura.
Because the 100 million was certainly, let's say, disruptive to the community.
It wasn't without pain, right?
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
And the 100 million means the developments, the Madbury Commons.
Just the new developments, yes.
Right, okay.
So I'm going to talk about this a little bit, and I know you're way ahead of me. So one of the ways that your tax assessment can expand is through appreciation. I kind of alluded to that a few minutes ago. Your value of your home is rising, as it is in the whole Seacoast area. I don't know the percent. In my town, it actually went up 22% in a year, which is quite a lot. But here, I don't know, it may be 10% or whatever it is. So as your values in town grow, that is expanding this tax base. However, as I pointed out, it doesn't mean your taxes will go down, because that, as the rate has to be reflective of that. So if you appreciate in value, but you still have more costs, you're
I have a
paying
question
more.
about that.
Yeah.
You know, so you're talking about market value of real estate, but you're not talking about the town's appraised value, because we haven't had a reappraisal.
It's going to be reassessed in 2018. There's a town-wide reassessment. Every 5 years by the Constitution of New Hampshire, you have to do that. So it will reflect, and of course, there's an adjustment figure that DRA gives to the towns to get you to 100%. But that will become adjusted actually this coming year when the assessment is done. Okay, so there's some factor there of appreciation. I have an example I'll show you in a second. The other way is through new construction. We can add new things, like, for example, Riverwoods is new construction. The Harmony Homes, I'll show you that in a second. That's one way. And then redevelopment, which there are a number of sites here, we'll talk about in a second, in Durham that are ready for redevelopment. I wanted to show you this because this kind of gets to what you were asking, Warren. I asked Jim Rice, our tax assessor, to give me a list of the commercial student housing sales this year and look at what the assessment was and what they sold for, because the selling price will be closer to that fair market value. And the difference was an additional $14 million for just the student transfers of property this year.
The difference between the appraised value.
What we
and
have
the
on our assessment.
sales value, what is that in percentage-wise, do you know?
I think it was around, what are we looking at? I don't have the
I can't see.
total here. I think it was around 50 mil, no, 4,
It's in your packet.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, you can look at it, but it's just, it may be like 20% or 30%. Okay. So here's some newly finished construction. I think we've already counted this in our plans, but here's Harmony Homes. And if you had a chance to go out and see them during their open house last week, you'll find it's a fabulous, fabulous building and facility. Craig and I are going out tomorrow to do an In the Biz. We're going to shoot it so that the whole town can get a chance to see it. I understand it's filling up quickly. They have to actually measure not to go too fast because their places are filling up, and it's just beautiful. That's all I can say. It's just the whole concept of his facility is so. You don't feel bad if you have to go there, I guess, or take somebody there, or put me there. I don't know, whatever.
If you gotta go, it's a good place to
Be
go.
there before I'm done.
Joke there.
It's like because we did go there, and it is an amazing facility, but it's a level of more care than Riverwoods. It's not just
yes.
like you get an apartment.
Yeah, it's not,
anything.
there's no independent living there. It's
No, it's
assisted
like
living.
if
assisted.
50% of it is for dementia,
Memory
Alzheimer, memory care, and then the other 50% is just people who really need a lot of help.
Yeah, and John has a really good philosophy. They are residents, they're not patients. They are people that are cared for. They provide activities. They want them to feel at home, so they bring more of their things than you might say in a traditional nursing home.
And they don't want you just to spend all your time in your room. I mean, it was kind of, as they was giving the tour, they were kind of talking about like the philosophy of memory care and also of, like, for example, like, well, you have a hookup for a TV in your room, but we really don't want you to have a TV in your room because we want you to get out of your room. So it really is well thought through.
At the tour, it was so exciting because Alan Bennett, who's on the town council, his mother-in-law is there. He couldn't show us her room fast enough. So excited about her room, the library outside,
Yeah.
her,
All her books,
her
yeah.
room, and able to bring most all her own furniture, and
Yeah.
it's so comfortable and nice.
Yeah. Plus the setting, it's just a gorgeous setting. And I think he's eventually going to put a barn and horses and potentially 2 more buildings. One would be another actual residential building, and one would be for activities. And I hope he does do that because it's not just that it will add value for the assessment, but it will be such a good quality of life for people in the area that need to be there. So I think we can be very proud of that. That's a really nice construction. And then coming, we have another, it's interesting, we're looking at all us gray-haired folks here, Riverwoods Continuing Care Facility on Stone Quarry, which is just a stone's throw away from Harmony Homes. But it's a very different concept. This is a continuing care where you are independent when you go in. You are on the more affluent side, perhaps, than in some of the nursing home facilities. And you have care through the end of your life. With something like 10,000 people turning 65 every single day, I don't feel special anymore. But anyway, that's what we're facing. So there's another.
So can we talk about, we were talking about revenue and tax assessment. How about the elderly exemption and how that's going to impact? There was controversy around Riverwoods, and in Exeter, they have an elderly exemption. Exeter is an elderly community. 20% of their population is over 65. Riverwoods is very active there, and Riverwoods in Exeter they get a significant elderly tax exemption.
Well, we're working with, this has all come up, we're working with the Riverwoods to find a solution, either a pilot or whatever it's going to be. So we have looked at, their Exeter arrangement. It's in the process, and, we want the best result for the town. We obviously need, this is one of the few remaining developable properties. And it's important that it not be contributing be contributing to the taxes that the town collects. And they understand that. So we're working with them on that. I can't say the answer because it's still in the works.
So that's in
But
negotiation right now?
definitely considering, believe me, that's being very thoroughly considered and discussed. And if you were watching the town council actually engaged a special attorney to help us figure out, what the tax status is and what we can do. So, yeah, that's, good point, Warren. So let me continue. So I picked probably the wrong title. I said missed opportunities, but I was having a bad day. So I want to explain this because it really is to help you. Young Drive was looking at a 4-story, yes, very large senior community development, but high quality. The apartments or condos were going to be in the $350,000 range. And that, at full build-out, was an estimated $60 million assessment. Now, I sound like all I care about is money, but that's all I care about. No. I do care about quality. I think that we could have gone about it a little differently and maybe salvaged it. I asked myself that question, what could I have done? And in retrospect, we have to be willing to look at everything. We have to be willing to look at not only what our eyes are going to see and how it's going to impact us, but what's the financial impact. It has to be a factor. It can't just be discounted as if it doesn't matter. It does matter. Then we have the Durham Business Park. Why? I just praised it. Why am I saying it's a missed opportunity? Well, originally the town set that business park up with 7 individual commercial lots. And now we basically have one business who had to give up the 4 front lots in order to do it. It turned out great. I'm not saying it was a bad decision, but it's a missed opportunity. We now can't count on those other lots ever being built.
Is the addition of Harmony Homes, Phase 2 and Phase 3, in those projections of tax revenue?
No, only Phase 1. He hasn't committed yet to the other 2. They were done as kind of placeholders in case he wanted to do that. And given the fact that he's filling up as fast as he is, I'm hopeful that he will decide to do it. But it's up to him. It's very expensive. We'll see. And then Stone Quarry, Riverwoods is certainly a great addition to Durham, but it, again, is using one of the few remaining business sites for a nonprofit. And so would there be more revenue if something else were to go in there? There's no answer to that because it's been sitting vacant for a long time and hasn't really had any interest. So this may be the best that we can do. But it is one of the few remaining locations. They're using about 12 acres, I think, 11 acres, something like that. And I think there's about 20 remaining. Not sure if it's buildable. Maybe the planning board knows that answer. I don't know. So,
But are those individual units that are sold to the people who live there?
in Stone Quarry,
In
Riverwoods, no, those are not sold. That is a different.
It is rent.
It's more of it's a rental / insurance program. It's kind of interesting how they do it. You actually pay quite a bit, but it's like long-term care insurance, and they are regulated by the insurance commission, so it's a little different.
So this is not a place where they actually buy that and move it into it. And
It's not like Young Drive where they would have been purchasing.
How would
their own.
the fact that it's a nonprofit organization impact the property taxes?
Are we talking about Riverwoods?
Yes.
We're working on that. I don't have an answer for you, Warren.
So one of the big components that they want is they would not pay a school tax. So it's so that's all. Again, this is all in negotiation.
So it's very interesting when the lady, I know who she is, but anyway, when she quoted someone who said, if you think education is expensive, well, I'll share this, although it is being taped, I probably shouldn't, but anyway. When I was working in the Senate, I went to an education forum, and this was folks who were all upset about public education. And there was a gentleman standing way in the back holding a couple of children in his arms, and all around him he had a bunch of children. And he yells down to the panel and he says, I'll pay for my kids' education, you pay for yours. That was his philosophy. And I looked up at him and I said, you think the cost of education is a lot, don't you? And he said, well, try paying for ignorance. Because when we don't educate people, we end up with so many problems. We have the cost of welfare, we have the cost of crime, we have the cost of... It's a responsibility for all of us. And one of the most common issues is, well, I don't have kids in school, why should I pay? Or I'm a senior citizen, why should I pay? I already paid all my life. But it's like paying for the roads, it's like paying for any part of our community. We all have a responsibility.
And just because I actually know something about this. It's something like 70% of the people who pay into the Oyster River school system do not have kids in the system. That is how it works. So it's like when I hear the idea that, well, we don't want to pay because we don't have kids. Well, if we all said that, then only 30. I mean, we would not have a school system.
It would be a private school system.
That is a straw man argument. That is not a legitimate argument.
Right.
Well, I'm going to pay for paving on other roads other than my own.
Right.
My question is, what is the non-profit? How does the town tax nonprofits? And are we saying that the town of Durham and Riverwoods have already cut a deal without figuring out the taxes?
No, Warren, we're not saying that.
I'm looking at Todd.
Todd is welcome to join me. The taxation of nonprofits is regulated by state statute.
Right, I know that, right.
So we don't make it up as we go.
I understand that, but what is it? Do you tax it as you do? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Todd Selig. The state statute lays out various categories of nonprofits, and in the case of Riverwoods, in particular, Riverwoods is categorized as a continuing care retirement community. And if they meet the strict definition in the statute, then the parties, then they would be exempt from taxation, period. And the parties are required to enter into discussions for a payment in lieu of taxes. Mm-hmm. Now, those discussions are voluntary. There has to be a meeting of the minds on what that payment in lieu of would be. If the parties are unable to come to agreement on a pilot, the statute defaults to the lesser of two calculations. And we're in the process now of figuring out, number one, whether Riverwoods meets the strict definition of a CCRC. Number two, what the lesser default calculation would actually be. And then number three, depending upon what we learn from those analyses, whether we can find a middle ground with Riverwoods that works for both parties. So the town has taken the position, in essence, that we want the deal that Exeter has, which was crafted 20 years ago when Riverwoods was established in Exeter. And at that time in Exeter, Riverwoods was a new entity. They were located in a neighborhood type area, and there was a lot of, I think, concern about development in the location. They were an unknown entity, and so Riverwoods agreed to a more robust payment than they're interested in making in Durham. And in essence, in Exeter, Riverwood, they take the what is it, the assisted living portion of the facility, the nursing home portion of the facility, and that is exempt. But the rest of the facility, the rest of the non-nursing home space and a prorated portion of the common area is taxed at the full Exeter rate. So it is not accurate that in Exeter, Riverwood pays full taxes, including the school. It's some prorated calculation, and we're trying to understand what that is as well. Riverwoods initially in Durham offered to make a payment to Durham that was equivalent to the local municipal and county portion of the tax rate, which came to on the non-nursing home portion of their project in Durham, which would have been a payment of around $430,000 a year to Durham. And from that, they wanted to deduct the cost of the debt service associated with the cost of running utilities to the Riverwoods project in Durham. And the reason they looked at that is because there's a tax increment finance district in place there, a TIF, that we established 12 or 15 years ago. And the expressed intent of that was to run water and sewer from where they terminate by the Dover Road pump station all the way out to the Riverwoods, the Stone Quarry Drive TIF. And the concept was that it was too expensive for the private party to run those utilities out to the site. The taxes paid, the full taxes paid by the private development would be captured by the TIF and be used to pay the town's debt service on the utilities. So in this case, I think the situation's a little different because Riverwoods is not a fully taxable entity. So I think it's a lot to ask that the town pay for the utility extension. So we're having conversations about whether the town should be involved in paying for those utilities at all. Riverwoods had proposed that the payment would be $430 a year, and from that they deduct the cost of utilities for a period of 15 years, and then after that time they'd pay the full $430. So we're engaging with them about whether Durham should share in the utility cost at all. Our position is we shouldn't, and whether the payment to Durham should include the school portion of the rate as well. And our position is it should. Riverwoods is that it shouldn't, and Riverwood argues that the financial burden of paying for the utility run themselves and paying the school rate would potentially be too much for the project to absorb. They hadn't figured those costs into their initial planning, and so we then have to weigh, well, what's other public benefits associated with a project like Riverwoods in Durham that allows residents who may want to downsize and stay in Durham at a place like Riverwoods. Is there some public benefit to that as well? And the
And are able to afford it.
You'd have to be able to afford it.
I mean, it's expensive. That's good. Thank you. So there's still negotiation. So Riverwoods is not definitely coming to Durham until these negotiations are completed. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, they need to know the full financial deal before they can fully commit. Right.
Thank you.
And
That's
they're
great.
still in the planning board process.
They are. That's right.
Yes, and don't forget, there's an economic benefit of them being there because their residents will bring a lot of money into Durham through, shopping and being here. So there's
Right, but then you get into the argument of tax reduction versus economic development. I mean,
well, yeah, okay.
you get into that discussion, and that's unclear too.
Right.
So.
And we've had, in very candid conversation, Riverwoods took the position that, look, they haven't ever had a school-age child come out of their Exeter facility, and they're not planning to have one coming out of the Durham facility. And the inverse of that is, well, you, as a resident in town, you may not have kids in the schools, but you still pay the school rate because there's a public benefit to educating
Many
kids.
students come out of the, we haven't had many school-age kids come out of the student residences either, but they
That's right.
they pay a great
They
deal
pay it
of
as well.
school tax.
That's right. So, yeah. So it's an active conversation. Riverwoods was hopeful that we could resolve the pilot conversations and get some agreement by the town council in advance of the November 8th planning board meeting, where Riverwoods hopes to have final approval. And we responded back to Riverwood saying that schedule is just not a feasible schedule for us, that if we had started these conversations months ago, it might have been feasible, but Riverwoods wasn't prepared to start the conversations, although the town had asked to start the conversations. So,
There's a leverage point as well about the land swap that was part of the
Right.
deal that is now on hold until such
That's right.
time as this is
That's right.
negotiated.
And that makes this a little different in that Riverwoods, in order to move some of their parking out of a wetland buffer, I believe, approached the town regarding a land swap. And the council authorized the swap. It seemed to make good sense, but we've made that swap contingent upon amicable pilot resolution. And if we can't come to that resolution, then it's possible we may not move forward with the swap, in which case Riverwoods would have to then decide if they can do the project without that swap. And it's challenging to do it without the swap. So,
I certainly understand the benefit of Riverwoods coming to this community, but there are a couple things. It is an exclusive community, so to speak, because it's expensive. Riverwoods, that is, and it caters to a certain demographic. And also taking a look at these numbers gives me pause to as a member of this committee, to support giving up too much.
No, the the other side of the, just to sort of respond to those two comments, at least in Exeter, they have some, fabulous volunteers. The people who live at the Riverwoods facilities tend to be people who are very engaged in their community. So I think it'd be an engaged population. I think it would support the downtown. And I think in all likelihood, if the Riverwoods project does not move forward, it's likely that site will sit idle for an extended period of time, in which case there are no pilot funds coming to the town. So we need to weigh all of that.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason nothing's happened there in 15 years.
That's why you're so good at what you do.
Okay.
I agree. Thank you.
Well, stay right there, Todd.
Oh, yes.
All right, so we do have a TRG in here at 10, so we want to wrap this up. But potential redevelopment, as you are all well aware, we have the Mill Plaza in the process of trying to kind of come to a project that everyone can support. 66 Main Street, which is still out there, Hetzel and Alexander. I separated it out because it's possible that could be done separate from 66 Main. And then there's a group Roger knows about of downtown property owners looking further out, maybe 7 or 8 years out, at possibly redeveloping some properties. There's 4 of them. And then, of course, I haven't given up on Young Drive. I'm hoping that even though Francis Chase is now renovating and trying to rent the properties that are there, that an opportunity will come along. I've been trying to introduce him to some investors, and maybe we can bring back another project that's more manageable that we could go in there. So those are kind of the potential redevelopment.
Question so what did you say Francis is doing? He's renovating what's there now?
Well, he's upgrading the existing, he's got permits to do that. I haven't been out to see it, but, and I
On
think.
Young Drive?
So the Young Drive thing is,
It's not.
Their proposal
There's nothing
is
in the
not.
works right now, no.
So right now, it's empty, though, right?
He's got several or some of the buildings rented.
Oh, really?
Some tenants, yeah. So, but here's some exciting, there is positives here, folks. You've heard now, because it's been publicly announced, that the university is looking at a research park. And this has been something they've been looking at for a couple of years. I told you about my trip down to Raleigh with them, where we looked at the Centennial Park. And a research park partnered with a university is an interesting way for the town to end up with some significant commercial development. The land is usually owned, and in this case would be owned by the university, but the buildings are owned by private industry, which means they are taxable entities. And then there's also the discussion part about the incubator. I'll mention that in a minute. So this map, which apparently is incorrect, was published by the university. I apologize for that. Somewhere on this line, where the circle is, probably north of it, is where they're proposing the 60 acres be.
so it came from UNH, right? I think
It did,
came
yes.
from them.
I'm sorry, I'm so short. It's
Yes.
this area right here.
Where are we over
Yeah,
there?
where the human resource building is.
Yeah.
And
Oh, out
Why
by,
we
okay.
pay for
So-
printing after
Out by the
this
west
office
edge.
day.
So since you did that, I'm going to do that. Okay. I want to explain something about that. I think visually.
You the chair too?
Yeah, where's like the
All
laser
right, so
point?
if I fall, I'll go on some kind of disability.
Oh, gee. Insurance
Oh,
better.
Lord. All right, so here's where they're proposing, right? And this little box right here, this is Technology Drive, where Goss is located, which is right here.
Right.
So looking at that, I think opens up some interesting possibilities. This is just me thinking out loud here, but I've already started putting some feelers out. Originally, I think the university thought that the Goss building would be a great location. It's 138 acres with that building for this proposed research park, but that didn't work out. So now they're looking at their own property. However, if they do build a research park, they have to vet whoever comes in. You can't just go there because you're a business. You have to have a relationship with the university. for example, a brewing company might be teaching their class on brewing. Could that happen? And so they would have an affiliation where their facility becomes a training ground for some of the students, and they get to build and do their business at the same time in this research park. So they can do research, they can have student interns, they can do all kinds of things that complement what the university is doing. However, not every company, in fact, a number of companies that will want to be there won't qualify because they don't have that affiliation that at the level that's needed. So if there were a second business park on the 138 acres that could take that additional interest and move them there, they would complement each other. And the cottages are located out there. I've heard, I don't know if this is a fact or not, but I've heard that they're not necessarily full with students now and that other people are renting them. So it lends itself to this really great concept of living and working right in an easily accessible area. The other piece is Route 4, which is the very tiny little road at the top there, means that employees can arrive and leave without really going through very much of Durham. They can just get right on and off of Route 4. So I think that there is some very exciting potential over the next 5 to 10 years in this part of your town. Now, I just wanted to just add that, and I apologize that I have the wrong map. So this is Goss, and one of the things that's been happening at Goss, as you know, is that the existing company has been declining, but the university has taken over a good percentage of the building now and has located a manufacturing center there. It was sponsored by one of their alumni who is very interested in this, and it's a really great asset to New Hampshire and to the region. Advanced manufacturing is not the factories of the past in any way. It's computers, it's clean, it's all kinds of math and all kinds of technology. And so this is a pipeline that's going to turn out what is very desperately needed if we want to attract more companies in the area, and that is the skilled workforce. So that's what's going on there. I have some final thoughts here. As the land use decisions are being made, I hope that maybe some of these economic factors can be considered and in deciding where and how much commercial growth Durham can endure. How much do we want, and where can we do it? I think I've shown you that really the most realistic places are out towards Technology Drive, but there may be some other opportunities as well. Projects need to be tempered with regards to neighborhood opposition, so as to consider all of the impact on the town. And I'm not criticizing anyone. I think that sometimes I get a sense that change is hard. It's viewed as an enemy. And so what do you do with an enemy? You defeat them. So if we could look at change in a little different way, if we could say, what's the good part of this that we can do in our community? And instead of beginning with no, start with yes, which is what I have at the bottom here, so that we're encouraging and inviting to ideas and vetting them through the planning board process. Then I just want to mention that Durham is essentially 100% retail build. There's a turnover factor, but pretty much we don't have space for everybody that wants to be here. So if we build additional retail space downtown, I am convinced it will fill up. You will have more. So that's it. And so where I plan to focus my efforts, and I invite you as a committee to work with me on this. So sometime within the next 2 years, I will retire.
You hope to retire?
I plan to retire. After this presentation, it could be sooner. I don't know. The highest and best use of my remaining time is to work on projects that have a chance to succeed and have the most success. I do feel that my interactions with the university are probably the best value for the town and hold the most hope of providing that largest incremental increase. But I don't discount all the other pieces. I still work on all of that. And I want to say, as we go forward with this park, to have an attitude of support for the university. I don't know what the town's piece of this is going to be, but they obviously feel there's a role for the town. And so whatever, it may be a zoning thing, it may be, I don't know what. It's too soon to know. But we certainly can be supportive of it. And again, start with the yes. And we like this idea. How can we make this work?
I just to add to that, I mean, we have heard a lot, particularly with the future land use chapter work on the master plan, about what people want to see downtown. Residents, they want to see a vibrant downtown with more uses and storefronts that cater to their needs. But the reality is, unless we create more storefronts, that's just not going to happen. There's a limited palette of space, physical space, for the kinds of uses to occur. And we're having a lot of people coming to see Mary Ellen who want to open businesses downtown, and there's no room.
There's no room.
So they go to Dover, they go to Portsmouth, they go elsewhere. So it's a real concern. So for people who just don't want to see change downtown, in practicality, what that translates to is you're not going to get the more diverse array of uses that you say you want. So I think people need to be open-minded to that.
I was asked the question last night about Durham's reputation, I guess. And I want to clarify something because I drove home and I said, I don't think I said this the way I wanted to. There is truth to the factor that that Durham is viewed as difficult. However, it is not, and I want to be very firm about this, it is not the planning board. I think the planning board does an excellent job of vetting projects and working with the various people who've come before it. It's not that. I think it's more the idea that people in town don't want it, and so therefore they tend to mobilize and make it more difficult. But it's not the staff, it's not the planning board. In my opinion, that's the problem. It's the idea that change scares a lot of people and they mobilize to oppose it. And so that's what I'm trying to encourage, is to just take a breath and look at what's happened. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think Durham looks really nice. But
I think from Sally and my perspective after all this, I think Durham, we have a cultural shift that we want to occur. We need to. Durham has to come to terms with itself that it's a multi-generational community. It is. It's like, so we have to learn to, as an educator, we have to learn to exist with students. We really do. And so, if you want a vibrant downtown that has a lot of storefronts, you have to have places, Saxby's, Sally used that example, where you have students are in there, where you have workers from the IOL, you have residents that are in there, that we all are supporting that business. And that is part of the puzzle of the community coming to terms with itself. And I think the more that we can encourage positive interactions with students and residents, it will lay the foundation for what everybody says they want as the vibrant community.
yeah, I think use your downtown. I know we started this summer with Let's Do Lunch Durham. Look what we did. Oh my gosh, we created all this stuff going on. But, if you haven't been downtown, go downtown and have lunch and walk around and just enjoy the amazing energy that you have in this town. It has a vibrancy. And all of these newer businesses that are so excited about their business and about doing events and working with the town and the Recs department and all the things that are going on, it is amazing. I'm finding, maybe I'm getting older, but it's hard for me to keep up with it all. There's just so much happening. I was also asked last night about the research park having an incubator, and it does say that in all the announcements, and I don't want to diminish that, but that wasn't the main focus of this park. In my understanding, the focus is this research park focusing on the businesses that come there. And an incubator or an accelerator or whatever term you want to give to it is a smaller component of that. It's part of it, and it's important because then they can take some of the ideas and the research and turn it into actual companies, and that is a big deal. But I didn't want you to have the impression that this is all a big, huge incubator space, because that's not my understanding of what they're doing.
That's an aspect of it, but
It's
not the
an
entire
aspect,
thing.
yeah.
I agree with Al that Durham is a multi-generational, demographically diverse town, and I think that can be used to our benefit, because we're positioned uniquely in Durham that we have students, we have undergrad, we have graduate students, we have young faculty, we have the IOL, which attracts, a younger demographic. The millennial is the largest demographic population now. They overtook the baby boomers 2 years ago, and there are 75 million strong in this country, and they are the future. So I think we've got an opportunity to attract millennials in business, in the research park in Durham. And change is difficult. Change is difficult for a lot of people. However, I don't think it's as difficult as we all think, because I think those that are against change have the biggest voices, because they're organized and they speak and they get out in front of people who matter. So, I'm struck by what the development needs are to keep our taxes at a reasonable place. And, I think that's something that not many people know.
Well, the good news is you've got 5 years, and you've got a lot of potential here. And Durham is very desirable. It's a desirable place to live. And with the university, what it offers to business, I think this park could be tremendously successful. As I say, I think there can be a spillover if we wanted to go and see Technology Drive be developed. So it's a positive, but it's good to think about it now and not wait until you're desperate and you have to do something.
You've got a number of projects up there that can expand downtown, whether it's 66 Main Street or Alexander Hetzel or the shopping center redevelopment. That's going to add hundreds of thousands of square feet of commercial space.
Well, if the hotel is done and Barnes & Noble comes to 66 Main Street and the plaza gets redeveloped, I really hope folks will realize how much that can help.
Yeah.
Because we spent several months trying to help massage that design so that it would be more attractive. We thought it was, and I do believe the design that came out was a better design, but it did require some variances. Let's really think long and hard before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think even those who are concerned and worried that it can be a lot better than they think. And here's something to consider. It's not a fact, but it's a consideration. If the hotel takes Hetzel and Alexander, there's approximately 300 upperclassmen beds that will be lost. 300. So even if the plaza goes forward, it's almost an exchange. We're not really adding net more people, more students, because I'm not sure that the university will replace those. But it's a possibility that
How many beds was the plaza requesting?
330.
So it's a swap.
So it's
It's
almost
a swap from non-taxable to taxable.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a,
That's a good thing.
And they're upperclassmen, which maybe is better than the
And the-
wild freshmen. I don't know.
and a hotel that would take over those spots, that maybe would be a land lease, so that would be taxable
Yes, the
as
hotel
building.
is a-
So
is a
it's
business,
a win-win, and I think there needs to be, and we've been talking, and I try to talk to as many people as I can about it. It's just a change and shift in your brain
Right.
About your opinion and how you're, what value you're placing on the students or the downtown, and I hear it, and it a lot of times, and it really makes me sad when I hear it, and I just want to challenge people to change their mind. But when people say, well, I don't want to go downtown because of students, I can't go downtown because of students, and I say, well, where do you go? I mean, people will go to Newmarket, and there are young people there. People will go down to Portsmouth, and there are tourists all over the place, and it I'm assuming it's left over from what it used to be, but it's not what it used to be. And I always think of this as you loved Durham 30 years ago. You loved Durham to what it used to be. You want to love Durham for what it can be, but you need to love Durham now, what it is. And you can't just be complaining about what it isn't anymore and demanding decisions made on what you want it to be without being engaged in it now. And it is your downtown. It belongs to you. you have every right to be there. And in this, and there are things to do. It may not be, you can't go downtown and buy a pair of shoes or get a house, house coat or get a new pair of pants or, pick up screwdrivers anymore. But you can go down there and sit with your friends and have a coffee or have lunch. And we're always talking about we have no place to gather. We have an entire downtown to gather in. And in the summertime, there's outside seating. We have that. It's not the kind of gathering space that we had 100 years ago, but it's the kind of gathering space we have now. And it's the way the world is done now. And so I just challenge people, just take that. We have signs all over the town. We're a welcoming community. Well, welcome yourself downtown and welcome the students that are there. And you probably have more in common with them than you realize.
Here, here.
Well said.
That was great.
Excellent.
Excuse me, I have to leave, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's all right.
I double booked myself this morning unexpectedly. I'm sure Bob, if there's something comes up with the roundtable and the planning board, I'm sure Bob can handle it, whatever it might be.
So,
River Woods, we've already talked about it.
so
That
I'm
was an
going
excellent-
to exit here.
Mary Ellen, that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
As with the DBA and the Celebrate, I think getting, the education is the key here. Any time, my suggestion would be is any time that anything is going out to the taxpayers of Durham, instead of a statistical analysis of what this is or where taxes go or something, numbers, if there could be something that represented the kind of the recap of what you've done. What this means, sure, we want a new fire station or we want a new school, we want this and this. What this means is your tax rate will go up X amount by the projections unless we have some kind of further development. I'm not sure how that would get put together in a friendly way, but that's the key.
I think
The average resident, I've had dinner with a number of residents in town and professors at the university, teachers, whatever, and a lot of them are aghast at the way Durham treats the business community in its perception. The planning board was wonderful,
Yeah.
and the council was during the last zoning board kind of thing.
right.
But through that, I learned of how much anger there is out there about change, and I feel
yeah.
for you looking at this.
I know.
It's stunning that the petition of 300 people presenting something to Hannaford. When I talked to the manager and the assistant manager, they laughed and they said, "What would the first question I'd be, Roger, if they'd come to me?" I said, "What do you want?" If they brought me 300 lists of 10 items that they wanted, we would have welcomed them to come in. But no, it was anger.
Yeah.
And the anger comes from change. So you're right on the money. I'm not sure how to work through it, but sometimes pushing things forward, like with the DBA and the Celebrate, sometimes they just have to get in there and duke it out.
The irony is, and it is ironic, that you have so much potential, so many good things in Durham. You already have what communities would envy to have. And when I talk to the businesses, and you mentioned this yourself, Roger, last summer was a really good summer. You didn't have to close up shop and go on vacation.
I put a full-time person on last summer for the first time in 25 years.
Wait, but that's in large part because we have more residential housing downtown
Absolutely.
Right.
that can support those businesses.
The
Right.
customers are there.
Yes.
Downtown is up over the summer? Business is up?
It was the first time the
Terrific.
Outback gift shop was up. It's been steadily declining, and I've been controlling the inventory level has been about the same, but it was actually up in June or July for the first time in 15 years.
Are you finding that in other businesses as well?
Right.
I mean, I put a full-time person on this summer instead of reducing the staff.
Well, we found in our doing lunch piece, which I have to thank you all, I gained I don't know how many pounds, but but we found that sometimes we couldn't get into the restaurants. They were full.
Yeah, and it's not just students. There are people downtown, and I think if you're downtown, you'd see it. There are people downtown, and it wasn't just students.
No,
it
right.
was professional people. It was adults. It was,
Employees. There's a lot more employees downtown.
It was a lot of people. I mean, that day at Lexi's, I think what took us I think they were staff prepared for a low turnout because it was summer and that place was packed. We had waited an hour for a burger. And this was pretty typical. There's, I think those days are gone.
Right.
Where it's empty.
In the discussions, two things have come to the surface. One is the amount of traffic now in Durham. And there's a lot of anger over the increase in the traffic. With the plaza coming online at some point, if that one egress is going to be the point, it's going to be pretty exciting, if you know what I mean. And two, again, is the same old thing we've been talking about, is the parking. I think my thought is part of the reason the traffic is heavier in downtown is the town's made an effort to make more parking spaces downtown. Ultimately, what that means is that people are circling downtown many times looking for a space as opposed to going to a destination parking, which would be a parking garage. And I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying my view of what it is the university got rid of all of their little parking spaces on the buildings because they found people circling all the time and said, no, you can't park on campus. Now you have to park out somewhere else. Parking problem solved. Now, they had the space, and it was one of these things they can dictate, but that's my observation, and that's been reinforced with a number of people recently just saying, I'd come downtown, but the parking and the traffic is so much. It takes me a half an hour just to get to a store. So those are my comments.
Mary Ellen, just a brief comment. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
So I watched it last night and learned even more
Today,
today.
wasn't it? I was feeling that.
But timing is perfect because our future land use chapter has its last formal meeting Thursday morning. And one of the topics that we've been not discussing as much as we think we should is tax stabilization.
Yes.
So what I'm requesting is maybe you could send this to Michael, who could then share it with our committee members who could review it before Thursday, because we have our final meeting on Thursday morning. And this park, the research park piece came out at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. We hadn't heard about it yet, but we
been
kind of
under the
gleaned in
radar.
our committee this whole, we called it Main Street West concept. Doug Banks from UH sitting beside me
I
couldn't
know.
say anything, but
Say
you know,
anything.
now when I see him Thursday, I'm saying, hey, you were holding back on us, Doug.
Yes,
But
and I'm sorry.
it ties into what work we're doing, and
I am sorry that
preparing
this
that future
wasn't
land use.
correct. I
that's what I saw, the announcement I saw, or one of those articles, the New Hampshire Business Review, or
We sent it to
It was
us.
in New Hampshire Business Review, yeah.
They probably printed it and realized a mistake, they wanted it changed.
But it's
But,
close.
thank you, and if you could send it to Michael, because I'd like the
Right.
committee to be able to look at it. and-
I'm glad Roger brought up parking, because I think that's going to be an issue if we, as we move forward with further redevelopment in downtown, and, you know, parking's been talked about for decades. Okay, I'll be kind and I'll say decades. So I hope that's a topic of interest for the town to take on at some point in
There's at
in the
least a
near
30-minute
future.
discussion on parking last night at your council meeting.
So I'm hoping that before my expiration date,
Oh, don't say that.
Expiration, retirement.
Yeah, we don't want to say expiration.
before I expire,
Before your contract renewal, was that what you were saying?
that there is at least a plan
Yeah.
for the parking. And I
The other-
think there's
yeah.
some possibilities.
The other thing I want to say is, you know, sometimes you just need to step back and say, a lot has been accomplished. And
Yeah.
because a lot of it has been accomplished, you know, it's sort of, so where do we go next? And we're a different, you know, I sold the bakery over 5 years ago now, and we're a different town than we were when I owned the bakery all those years. And that's a good thing. That is a really good thing. So, you know, people's mindset have to catch up to where we are now, and Sally was spot on. You know, we are who we are now, and you know, if you want to change things, get involved, frequent the businesses, see what's even here, and then you can make more valid decisions.
Well, I was just say, I mean, people can only absorb change at a rate that works for them. And we have experienced a lot of change over the last 4 or 5 years in Durham. That change, however, was warranted and necessary.
Right.
And without the change, we were slowly becoming sort of atrophied almost.
Right.
And the buildings were deteriorating. We weren't attracting vibrant new activity downtown, but we are now. And so people from the outside who are coming into Durham are saying, "Oh my God, I haven't been here in a few years. I can't believe what you've done with the place." And I think for a lot of residents, it's taken them some time to catch up with the change. But the feedback we got even after the construction was done was, "Wow, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be." Which for Durham is a success because people don't like change. And now what we're hearing is, it's actually pretty nice.
When you're looking at trying to get the farmers market at Madbury Common, I mean, that wouldn't even be a possibility without that development. And it's
That's
a
right.
positive development. I mean, it was painful to watch. I have to admit, I'm like, what is this big hole in the middle of town when I first moved here?
Right.
Because it was horrible and it was ugly. But you know what? When you got your kitchen to redo it, you hate the process, but you love the kitchen after.
Exactly.
So it's a process, and I think that as we go forward, it's about establishing positive relationships, partnering with the university, partnering with our businesses, and trying to create a more positive atmosphere for the development that will come from the way we want it, the way we see it, the way we envision it as a town of Durham, that will benefit everybody in the end, and to just try to pull back on this adversarial
Right.
gut reaction
Right.
to things, and just to try to be more positive.
And I think the Celebrate Durham DBA discussion is a microcosm of who we are. Because Roger, I want to thank you for being involved in that and trying to piece all that together, because that's going to be vital moving forward. And it's a microcosm of who we are. We're in transition right now, and we've got a lot of good young blood and a lot of people with experience who need to work together.
Right. And I think a lot of it is, as Sally mentioned, is the conversation you have. If you say to somebody, people who live in the Faculty neighborhood or the Baghdad Road neighborhood, they're proposing a new project downtown. Isn't it terrible? It's going to be disruptive and change and this and that. Someone's reaction might be, "Oh my God, that's terrible. I don't want to see that change." But if instead the conversation is, are you concerned about the taxes you're paying? Would you like to stabilize the tax rate?
Right.
Would you like to see a broader array of goods and services downtown? Would you like to see a vibrant downtown? Would you like a downtown where you can walk, without having to use your car and get a whole host of things that you might otherwise have to drive a long way to get? Isn't that the kind of community you want? I think most people would say, yeah, that actually is. So it's challenging people to have a deeper conversation about development.
Absolutely. We need to change the beginning of the story.
This is the type of conversation we need at the podium at all of the town meetings. And this means more people that are involved speaking just like that.
So, Roger,
I want to compliment Sally for saying on the talk of Jenkins Court being walkings, we have to get the businesses involved there. That was the key.
You need to get the businesses involved, and it's hard because when there is change, it's the people who perceive they're going to be negatively affected,
Right.
who are motivated to come forward. And
That's right.
And by and large in Durham, we have a well-managed municipality. We're dealing with problems people have, so residents can go about their lives. They have busy lives, and not worry about the municipality. And it's the people who don't want something to happen who are engaged. And I think the challenge is to reach out to the broader Durham and say, look, change is important for the health and welfare of this community. You need to pay attention and engage when a project comes forward to offset the relatively few people who are saying, look, I just don't want to see anything happen anytime it's affecting me and my backyard and my personal quality of life, even though that might be the 2 or 3 households who may be affected, and there may be a much larger public benefit. So I think we need to think about ways to engage the broader community.
And I think every
get
one of
involved.
us are ambassadors for that. We can start the conversations wherever we are. We can bring it around to this more positive.
Right.
view.
And it's not to say the people who express concern are wrong. They may have valid concerns that need to be considered,
Right.
but there needs to be a balance in the concerns brought to the table. And unfortunately, what we hear at the podium is typically the people who just don't want it.
Yeah.
whatever it is. And that happens a lot,
Yeah.
and that's the result, that results in a negative perception about Durham, that you can't develop anything because you're going to meet an army of opposition no matter what it is. And that's often accurate. Often the residents who are coming forward have very good feedback, which results in a better project.
Right.
But there needs to be a balance of
How do
what's
we
coming
sell
forward
that
at
to the
podium.
Temporary.
big world out there that says, oh no, Durham? We have to figure out how to do that.